name's Nick Gora. I'm a principal at NeuroNeeds, and I'd like to welcome everyone today to what I think is going to be a really interesting talk by Amy Bodkin. It's Behavior, Bridging the Communication Gap. So without further ado, Amy Bodkin, tell us a little about yourself and why you chose this topic.
Yeah. So thanks for having me. My name is Amy Bodkin. I am an autistic adult, and I'm also a former school psychologist. I now work worldwide consulting with families online to help them kind of figure out, okay, where are we? What assessment tools can we use to kind of figure out where we are? And then what are our bodies asking for? Because when we understand better what our bodies are asking for, then we're able to provide our kids with the support that really meets what their needs are in that moment. And coming at this from a perspective of someone who is autistic, someone who was a school psychologist, so has all of that additional training, and then also being a parent of two autistic children myself, it gives me a little bit of a unique insight that a lot of people don't have. So it kind of helps me to be able to pick up on some of those nuances that a lot of times people miss. I always, whenever I'm working with a family, I give them a really in-depth child development questionnaire that asks all kinds of medical questions, because so often I find that there are little red flags that most professionals don't know to pick up on. Little things like, bleeding gums can be inflammation, and inflammation can get worse when we are anxious or when we have an uncaught medical issue. So, looking at the child as a whole person. So, the reason I chose this topic is because behavior is a really important um, it's a really important topic to parents because it's something that they deal with every day, all the time. And it can honestly create some of the largest amounts of frustration in our homes, both for parents and for kids. But
No doubt.
when we think about behavior, a lot of times what we're thinking about when it comes to behavior is, well, I've got this behavior problem. So how do I fix it? What's wrong? What am I doing wrong? What do I need to do? And most of the time, actually all the time, behavior is nothing more than communication. So when we see behavior problems are really nothing more than miscommunication. So if we can clarify more what behavior is, how to read that behavior, and then how to communicate back through our own behavior, then we can have less miscommunications, and we can also have less frustration and more positive relationships and days in general. So I feel like it has one of the largest impacts on the parent relationship, your life, but it also takes the least amount of work. Like, it really doesn't take. What I'm going to share with you today is 4 easy little things that you can do, and they really don't take that much extra work. So the first one is you've got to be able, yeah, it's not going to take much work. That's my goal. And actually, like, when I'm working with families, that's my goal in general. I want us to work smarter, not harder. So when I was growing up, I had a lot of learning challenges, and it was extremely frustrating. And I kind of equate it to banging your head against a brick wall. If you bang your head against a brick wall long enough, you'll probably eventually break through the wall. But wouldn't it be easier to just like walk down and use the door? So I'm going to show y'all the door.
Yeah,
You can just walk down and use the door.
And Amy, what I hear you saying too, and I think you might even have said this before, don't just use your ears, but also use your eyes.
Yes. I'm going to tell you about how to use your eyes. That's our first step. How do we use our eyes to listen? We're always told to listen with our ears. But when it comes to autistic children, especially, I mean, anybody you can use your eyes with, but especially when you're talking about autistic children, it's really important to use your eyes because sometimes they're not communicating verbally, and sometimes they're communicating verbally but not in the way that you expect, not in the way that, like, what they say may not mean the same thing to them that it means to you. And so that can be a real challenge, and that's why listening with your eyes is so important. But also, there's so many other clues that we can make use of when we are using our eyes. So, with using your eyes, we're going to break it down into ABCs because ABCs are nice. It's easy. So, A is for antecedent. So, antecedent is going to be what happened before the behavior. And I've got some examples of these too. So, when we're talking about what happened before the behavior, we're talking about things like um, when my daughter was little, she was 2 years old. She came into the kitchen with a block of cheese. And I'm like, no, we're going to go. So I put the block of cheese down. Well, she leaves and comes back around the corner with a chef's knife running at me. So you'd think from, like, just looking at that, you might think, oh my goodness, she's a homicidal maniac. But in reality, she realized, oh, she doesn't understand. I want cheese. And so she went to go get the knife because that would be the next logical thing in her mind. So looking at the antecedent helps us understand her behavior and that she's not trying to be a homicidal maniac. But we can also look at the behavior itself. So that's what's actually happening in the moment. That's probably what you're going to notice most, and it's probably what you're going to be the most clear on. It's what happened before and after that tend to be the big clues. The consequence is C. So antecedent behavior consequence, which if you've ever done any kind of ABA, then you've probably heard this before because it kind of goes along with ABA theory. Well, not really ABA theory, behavior theory, which is scientifically valid. Now, how we use that science and theory in practice, that's where we get into ethics, and that's a whole other conversation. But when it comes to the consequences, an example of that might be when my son was little, he had, what we didn't know is we did not know he had celiac disease that had gone undiagnosed. And so we didn't notice any particular behaviors outside of the fact that he was really grumpy. And I thought that it must just be his personality and that he had a really grumpy personality. But the consequence, though, is that he ended up becoming like in a failure to thrive state. And so that consequence told me something's going on. So that behavior that I knocked off as being, okay, he's just a grumpy kid, turned out to be a sign, but I didn't know it until we got to the consequence. So looking at your antecedent behavior consequence, that can kind of help you key into what could this be saying, because it's not always what you think it is. Even with me, I went to school and studied, I specialized in behavioral psychology, and I completely missed it multiple times with both of my kids. So even with the training, you can still miss those things. So just using your eyes to pay attention to what happened before, what's happening, and then what happens afterwards.
So, Amy, the one case, your daughter brings in the cheese, brings in the knife because she wants to cut the cheese. She misses the cue, like, you can't have it. Your son, he's grumpy. You miss the cue that something's going on. You think, okay, this is just a personality trait.
Right, exactly.
So, okay, so what next?
So next, we're going to go switch gears to a different tool that you can make use of, because the first tool is just kind of bringing awareness and trying to think about what could this mean.
Got it.
So the second tool that you can use, this one's setting the stage, because if you want to have good communication with someone, let's think about a relationship. Marriage is a great example. You want to have a good relationship with your spouse. What do? You got to put in time, right? And it's got to be positive time, not negative. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time every single day, like 5 to 15 minutes with your kid, and we're going to use what I call drip. And drip is we describe, we reflect, we imitate, and we praise. So, what does that look like, though? So, it means that we're getting down on their level. We're spending time doing what they want to do. We're playing with them. But we're not telling them what to do. We're not directing the play. We're not asking them any questions. We're putting no demands on them at all. And all we're doing is, oh, wow, I really like that picture you're drawing. Or, oh, you're using the blue crayon. You know what? I like that blue crayon. I'm going to use a blue crayon too. That's imitation. Imitation's the highest form of compliment. Wow, you're doing such a nice job. I can see the care that you're taking in making this picture look really great. You know, everybody loves it when somebody can sit with them in their space with what they love and just notice what they're doing and what they're excited about and what they are passionate about. So when we do that with kids, we are kind of filling up their love banks. I know that was popular in some pop psychology books for a bit. But the important thing to remember is that when we're talking about positives and negatives, for every one negative a child gets, they need at least 4 to 7 positives to offset that one negative. And so, as you can see, like kids get a lot of demands placed on them. Brush your teeth, go to the bathroom, make your bed, get your breakfast. You're going to be late. You need to hurry. Let's go out the door. And then, if they go to school, then they get to school and they're like, okay, I've now got to go sit down and do morning work. Oh, I'm late. Now I got to do something else. Or go stand in line. You've got to ask permission to go to the bathroom. You didn't ask permission and now you're in trouble. There's, so many demands that are placed on a kid's life. And when we really think about it, are they getting as many positives as they need? Most of the time, no. And so I think that's something that's really important to remember. So taking some of that time to have that time where they know, every day I'm getting to sit down and the demands are shut off. Unless, of course, something really dangerous happens, in which case then, yes, you have to be the parent. But we can shut that down for just like 5 to 15 minutes and to reconnect and to bond and to build that positive relationship. That's
I think
critical.
that's really critical, and I've worked in a field where what you're talking about is relationship building.
Yes,
Because once you have that understanding and that relationship, navigating negative situations is all the more easier.
exactly. Exactly. You have to have the foundation. And that's why, to me, that's the second step, because you've got to lay that foundation. I like to get people listening with their eyes first, because then they start to notice what's going on in different situations. But that second step is really building a solid foundation, because people really don't care how much you know or what you want until they know how much you care.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you're saying, and I want to go back to the first one because
Hmm.
when I was in business school, we took a class called the Sixth Sense, and the
Oh.
concept was in business and in life, there's all this information around there that we're ignoring.
Hmm.
That could be very valuable. And I think what you said about using your eyes and watching how the person you're interacting with is behaving is so important on a daily basis.
Hmm. Yeah.
That says a lot that we don't become aware of and kind of ignore, and then we go on the words and we miss a lot of what's going on because kids don't always articulate
Exactly.
what they're feeling. They tend to act
Hmm.
it out more. To your point,
Yes. Yes, and there's a quote from Jane Eyre where she talks about how kids they might be able to process their own feelings, but even if they can manage that, they cannot express verbally what that is. And the thing is that with kids, we're still working on basic brain development. And
right?
so there's limits to what we're capable of. There are things that I can express now as an adult that I could not express as a child about my experiences in childhood. because I had to be able to process through it and then to verbally express it.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes we forget that kids don't have fully developed brains and what that actually means.
Yeah, I think
So,
that's so important for all our viewers or listeners that
mm,
that watching your kids on a daily basis and observing them can teach you so much about them
absolutely.
and help you take in and better understand them. And really, when you have those good and bad moments, really get a deeper and better understanding. I mean, I think that point that you raised, I didn't learn that till much later in life.
I
I,
know.
the cat was way out of the bag for me by the time I got this. But for our younger listeners and young parents, and even people who want to be parents who aren't there yet,
Hmm.
or people just in relationships,
Yes.
this is a huge skill that most
Yes.
people are not aware of.
Exactly. And then I've got a third step. There's four of them. So my third step is thinking about our expectations because expectations can kill just about anything. We all will have our own expectations of life, and then we're disappointed when things don't go according to our expectations. Or we're in a relationship with someone and they're not meeting our expectations. And so that creates this negative feeling, which then causes problems. It's the same case with children, but our expectations are usually what we call rules. So we need to think about what our expectations are and really like think through and process that and make sure that we are choosing the best expectations we can, because there's several things we got to keep in mind. First of all, you cannot remember and enforce more than about 3 to 5 rules, period. Like that's about the limit. They've studied this, and that's about the limit of what people can remember and consistently enforce. And if you can't consistently enforce it, there is no point in making more rules, because if you can't consistently enforce it, then why should you follow them? And if a child can't remember more than 3 to 5 rules, how are they supposed to remember to do it in the first place? So, got to keep our expectations to a level that we can actually do. So, that's the first one. We only want 3 to 5 rules. Personally, I can't do more than three,
Yeah,
because if it gets more than three, I can't remember them.
yeah, I'm
I
with
know this about myself.
you.
Mhm.
I'm with you. I mean, it's
Yeah,
your head's spinning, and then you create failure. When you create failure, you damage relationships and
that.
confidence.
Yes, we want to make rules be a positive experience, something that helps us to be able to grow and to find confidence in being able to interact with others. When it becomes a negative, it creates this negative cycle of like blame and shame, and that I'm not good enough, and we don't want to do that because that's going to put us in down a completely different path than we want to go. And if you're already down that path, there are things we can do to work out of that path. So if you've, come to this late in the game, it's okay. We can undo some of that. We can, find our way back to that path. Um, so if you go with 3 to 5 rules, next thing you need to do, they need to be positively stated. And I'm not saying this strictly because, well, we want everything to be positive and rainbows and unicorns. The reason I'm saying this is because that if you tell kids what to do, you don't have to tell them what all not to do. And they're very creative. So if I make the rule of we sit in our chairs on our bottoms, then I don't have to make the rule, we do not stand in our chairs. We do not cartwheel off our chairs. We do not stand on our heads in our chairs. I mean, I could keep going.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why the positively stated, because we're telling kids what to do. And quite honestly, most of the time they want to know what to do. And sometimes when they don't follow rules, it's because they don't know what to do. They just know what not to do. And so it's kind of like navigating this minefield of, well, they told me not to do this, so I'm going to do this. And then it doesn't go well. And they're like, what happened? I didn't do what I wasn't supposed to do. And if we don't set clear expectations, like if they don't know what the rules are, that's also like walking through a minefield. So when my kids were small, we had 3 rules in our house and we would go over them every day. because I needed to remind them and me what the rules were. They needed to be able to tell me what the rules are. Because if they don't remember them, it's really not fair for me to come in and get on to them about breaking the rules when they can't remember what they were in the first place. And when they were little, our rules were very simple and positively stated. It was, let's see, it was we leave the furniture assembled because they kept taking the furniture apart.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Oh, we stay out of the fireplace because we live in Florida, so we don't have a fire very often. But I'm like, you've got to learn that you can't just crawl into a fireplace. This is not safe. And I can't remember what the third one was right off the bat, but they were very simple, concrete rules. That's the third thing. They need to be concrete, something where you can see, where we can all know, oh, you broke the rule. It's not a matter of opinion. And also, it's not focused on something that you can't see. If we make a rule, you can't have a bad attitude. That's really objective. Different people are going to see that differently. This needs to be something where we can go, okay, yes, that's against the rule, or no, that's not. It's also really important with rules. Well, you can have some more abstract rules, but those usually come when kids are a little bit older and they're used as teaching opportunities. So our rules now are a lot more abstract than they used to be. We still have 3 rules. They're just different than they were when they were little. They eventually quit taking apart the furniture and crawling in the fireplace. So we got to move on. And you have to pick the ones that are most important to you because you only get 3. So you got to really think, what's really important to me? And what can I make a non-issue by changing something in the environment? So instead of telling them not to get into this closet, why don't I just lock the door? Then I don't have to make a rule of it.
Yeah.
But with the abstract ones, like now they're teenagers and they can tell you, you ask them what their rules are, they know what they are. It is, we are kind, we are truthful, and we do our work. Those things are more abstract, but they're used as teaching moments. So when something happens and someone's not kind, I'm like, hey, was that kind? I don't think that was kind because this is how it came off to the other person. What can we do to fix that, to make that better? And so it becomes a partnership where we're having the conversation, we're talking it out, and we're talking about, what can we do to make things better? The reason we have those 3 is partially I'm telling them how to be successful in my home. And to be successful in my home, no matter who you are, you really need to not lie to me because I don't take it very well. I'm still really mad about the 9th grade biology textbook that drew a picture of the protein pump in a cell wall. We don't have protein pumps in our cell walls. It's a trait of the cell wall itself. There's no actual little purple blob there. And it really irritated me. I feel like that's like that relates back to some of my autism. Like I really don't like being lied to, and I know this. And so when I'm making rules for my family and my household, I'm telling them this is how you get along in this house. This is how you survive. I'm giving you tips to make life better. Being kind, that's another thing. I'm really sensitive to people being unkind to other people. I mean, you don't become a school psychologist without being sensitive to some of those kinds of things. It's why we go into helping professions. So those were 2 really important ones to me. But somebody else might have very different ones due to their personalities, things that they find more triggering. But you got to really think about your environment and what is most important because you only get 3 to 5. I remember the third. I remember the third rule from when they were little. It was we go outside with an adult.
I get what you're saying, and I think it's good in the sense it gives a framework.
Yes.
And it causes them to be a little bit resourceful. And I'm thinking about teenagers. When you say you got to do the work, and like for a typical parent, and for those of us that have teenagers, and you say, gee, we just want you to do these basic things around the house,
Mhm.
and you
Mhm.
don't do them.
Right.
And you
Right.
wind up telling them every day, you have to set the table, remember. You have to do this, remember.
Mhm.
It feels like, what can I get away with? Right?
Yes, but most of the time it goes back to executive functioning. Most of the time. Not always. When we have problems with being able to be successful with rules, the next question we have to ask, and that's outside the scope of what we're doing today because that's the whole other rabbit trail. But what I will tell you though is that a lot of times when kids aren't being successful with their rules, it's because either they're not clear enough, which sometimes that's the case, um, and again, the ones I told you for teenagers, like we're using pretty abstract, non concrete rules at this point, but that's because we've reached a point where that works for us. Um, but also, it depends on their executive functioning. So, depending on your autistic children are lacking in executive functioning skills, so are ADHD kids. And actually, quite honestly, executive functioning skills don't really come online till much later. And sometimes they don't even ever come online at all. I mean, out of the 12 major executive functioning skills, I feel like I have three, but I make those three work for me. So when we're thinking about those kinds of things, depending on the skills you have will depend on what works for you. So my mother, when I was little, always wanted me to clean my room, and she'd get so frustrated with me because I couldn't clean my
Exactly.
room. Yeah, this is very relatable. So I really wanted to be able to clean my room, but I could not manage it. And so one day when I was in fifth grade, I checked a book out of the library called How to Clean Your Room because I really wanted to. I just couldn't get it together. And what I learned from the book is that my mom was teaching me how to clean my room the way that she cleans, but it wasn't a way that worked for me. She would go into her room and she would go zone by zone. Okay, first put up all the Barbies, then put up all the clothes, then, all these different things. I would get so distracted by all the clutter in the room that I couldn't focus to get anything done. And so this book told me to take everything that was out of place and put it on the bed. And then the room was clean, and I could just go to the bed and pick one thing at a time to go put it where it goes. So, most of the time, when we're not being successful with rules, if we are making them concrete, positive, only a few, if we're doing all these things, most of the time kids will be successful. When they're not, usually there's something else going on that we've missed, usually executive functioning.
Yeah. It seems like to me, um, to the technology era is
Mm.
preoccupying their brains. So, for
Mhm.
example,
Mhm.
um, I've noticed a lot with kids, when you say clean your room is the classic example.
Yeah.
Wherever they have been in a room lies some piece of clothes. They go into the bathroom, there's the socks on the floor. They go into the
Mhm.
room when they got in their pajamas, there's their clothes on the floor. They went
Yeah.
downstairs to get something to drink, and there's a glass they left on the table.
Mhm.
You know every room that they've been in, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm starting to say now, listening to you, well, okay, their brains are fixated on something else other than
Yeah.
that.
And
And
there's a lot of things to be fixated on. I mean, even outside of technology, just the basics of, okay, I've got to coordinate walking up and down the stairs. And quite honestly, walking up and down the stairs is challenging, especially if you have fine motor or gross motor delays. I cannot tell you how many times I fell down the stairs in junior high. Like, so many times. And like basic stuff that we're used to coordinating because we have a fully developed brain, but are not as easy. Oh, especially once puberty hits. Oh my goodness gracious. It's like their brain has gone on vacation.
exactly. So Amy, this is really fascinating because, so let's say I observe this,
Hmm.
and I say to my child, "Gee, what are you thinking about right now?" And he says, "Well, I don't know. I'm wondering how fast this car goes." And I say,
Yes.
oh, that's great. I get it. Now, my expectation is to somehow wean in. Are you aware that you've left clothes lying around in every room that you've been in? And one of our three rules is to keep
Mhm.
the house as neat as we can.
Mhm.
Because clutter makes me crazy.
Right, and I get that because that also drives me crazy.
So,
So
so the interaction is, yes, I understand that rule. And then they go in and they get a cookie and they leave the wrapper on the table in the kitchen. And I'm trying to figure out now how to bridge
right,
this.
bridge that gap.
I think that's the struggle for parents, right? Because
Oh, yeah.
we come across as, okay, I don't really care about how fast the car can go. Do you realize that we have this rule and you have left now clothing everywhere in complete disregard of this rule, right?
Mhm.
Not the way to go.
Right, right. So
But,
when we're go ahead.
but this is what I'm thinking.
Okay.
I say, hey, Sam, what's our three rules in our house,
Mhm,
right? And one of them's
mhm,
clean. And you know what? I have observed that there's stuff lying all over this house. Everywhere you go,
mhm,
you leave stuff lying around. How can we fix this?
mhm, mhm. And working together to come up with something that works is often the thing you need to do. So, for some people, being able to remember what they're supposed to be doing, like we leave clutter everywhere we go, like just as human beings in general, and remembering constantly to be able to pick up after yourself can be a lot of taxing information happening in a developing brain. So, like, one way of solving that would be to go, you know what? We're going to set a little alarm that goes off every hour while we're awake. And when that alarm goes off, we all stop and pick up clutter for like 5 minutes. And maybe that's what's needed. It depends on the family, it depends on the person, and also on the kind of brain development that is happening at the time with the kid. And also with rules, we're teaching them to develop habits, but those habits take time.
You,
And they also take consistency. And that's why you can't do more than 3 to 5 rules, because if you're not consistent, the habit does not develop. And it takes longer to develop habits when you have no executive functioning skills. Just saying. So
yeah. And what you're getting me to realize too is, okay, I'm using my eyes. This is not malicious. This is not,
exactly.
I'm going to irritate my parents by leaving everything lying around. So that kind of dials back
Right.
my anger and negative
Hmm.
situation
Right.
capabilities, right?
It still
Okay,
irritates us because,
yeah,
like, we're people too.
it
And there
irritates.
are things that are going to trigger us.
Yeah, but okay, I need to work on them developing a better skill set here. I need to be more
Um,
patient, and maybe with that patience, I'll get better results.
Exactly. And a lot of times when we're not getting good results, it's because we need to make a change or a shift in some way because what we're doing isn't working for us. My mom could tell me all the time, go clean your room, and she could walk me through her process. It did not work for me because
Yeah,
I'd get so visually overstimulated, I couldn't focus to get anything done. So, a lot of times when we're having trouble with things, then I think, okay, what all is involved in this? What skills are involved in this? What things do we have to be able to do to make this a reality? And then, is there a way to do that differently? Maybe this kid doesn't operate as well that way. Technology has been a game changer for me. I do not miss appointments anymore because things ding at me, generally speaking. Every once in a while, there's a problem, like when I get the wrong time zone. But generally speaking, I don't miss appointments anymore. But I did miss my kids' doctor's appointments when they were small sometimes because I was using a paper planner and it couldn't ding at me. So we can use technology in a positive way. Can technology be used in a negative way? Absolutely. And technology can also end up running us instead of us running it. And again, that's another area where they're having to learn skills and learn how to manage different skills. It No matter what you're talking about, whether it's technology, books, movies, chess, all of those things have come under fire as rotting kids' brains. Like even chess. Years ago, they were like, chess is going to rot our kids' brains, or children's literature is going to rot our kids' brains. There's always been something. And the thing is that lots of things in life can give you a dopamine hit. And you can't avoid a dopamine hit by just avoiding technology or children's literature. You have to learn to live in a world where you will get dopamine hits, and you have to learn how to manage those. And so learning to do those things on a smaller scale with support from an adult, that's how we move forward and be successful in life. That's why we start with a small number of rules. We work through those. We learn how to help each other do things better. We learn how our brains work best. So it's a lot more complicated, but starting with 3 basic rules is a really good starting place.
Yeah, I like this. So I'm going to dial this back a little, and I think using the eyes for the emotional intelligence is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think setting. I love the idea of basic rules
Mm-hmm.
and being patient and having little victories, I guess,
Yes. Yes.
right? To get
Yes.
everyone to that better level. There's a great theory about change called Cotter's 8 steps.
Mm-hmm.
And he says anybody that wants someone to go from A to Z is crazy. You have to go in incremental steps.
True.
You're not just going to go from failure to success.
Yes.
And I think
Yes. And
that's what
that's
your
a great
theory
example.
is highlighting.
Yes,
Become more
exactly.
aware of the characteristics of whom you're dealing with.
Yes,
Develop
exactly.
some basic rules that involve the parties for success. Be patient and gradually get into that place of good habits together.
Exactly, exactly. And find different ways of making things work. With the rule, you know what you need. So, how can we make that a reality? Does it have to look the way it's always looked? I mean, there's many things we've changed in our home because I realized, you know what? This is someone else's expectation that I don't need to take on. For a long time there, and really to this day, we don't fold clothes in our house. We don't. We put them in the clean clothes laundry basket, and we put the dirty ones in the dirty clothes laundry basket. We keep it simple, and we buy clothes accordingly so that it will work with that system.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
there are lots of different ways we can change our homes and our lives to fit us, the people in the home.
I think that's an outstanding point. The one final piece I want to talk about, and I think it's a my generation piece, is that old parental hierarchy mentality. I'm
Hmm.
the parent, I'm the boss.
Yeah.
I think, especially in the autism world and special needs world, that to me sounds like the antithesis
Yep.
of what we've been talking about. There's a certain
Mhm.
amount of, I set the rules, but there
I
is.
have a good example of this. So when I was a kid, I used to get really, really frustrated about having to mow the lawn. I would get really mad because I didn't buy the house. I didn't buy the lawnmower. Why did I have to be responsible for it if I wasn't getting to make any of the choices? Which
Yes.
to most adults sounds absolutely ridiculous. Hello, you're the child, you live in this house, you're supposed to contribute to the family, blah, 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 blah. But from an autistic perspective, it made absolutely zero sense. And when our kids got older and started helping with yard work, I told my husband, I'm like, you're going to the hardware store and you're going to go help them pick out a tool that is sized to them. Because I got really frustrated trying to use a tool that was sized too big for me, and it made it harder. And so, we don't think about those kinds of things because you're right. We tend to think in a hierarchy. I'm the parent, you're the child, I say jump, you say how high. Well, it doesn't work with an autistic child most of the time because we look at that and go, I'm sorry, that doesn't make any sense. Make it logical. So it really works better if we can recognize that they're going to see some things that we're not going to see and be able to call us out on it. And we're going to see things they aren't able to see and call them out on it and create more of a partnership where we can help each other, because they are the experts on their bodies and how their brains work. but we are the more experienced parties when it comes to life. So we can put down our foot and be like, no, this is an experience you have to have. My son has been invited to compete in a music competition. He doesn't want to do it. He's afraid. He's like, I'm not going to be good enough. I'm like, you have to do this because you have to start learning how to try and earn scholarship money because quite honestly, like, we're not made of money. If you want to do something else in life, you're going to have to work at it. And so there are those moments where, you kind of have to say, look, this is something we have to do. But you know what? I'm going to support you in that. I'm going to listen to what you have to say. We're going to, go through your concerns and we're going to take them seriously and we're going to accommodate you where we can. So,
right on.
Especially with teenagers.
Yeah.
Teenagers can smell authenticity a mile away. And if you're trying to, level up and be like the dominant force, the head of the hierarchy, they can smell it. And they know that, sometimes we're trying to puff up our chest a little bit more and think that, all right, we got this. No, they can tell. And so it's much better if we can come from a place of authenticity and work as a team, but recognize that we have different experiences and different expertises that we can combine together. When my kids were small, they were complete opposites in some ways. One learned to read by the time he was 2, the other one learned to read at 9.5. And my favorite story, honestly, of them when they were little is coming into their room and them both being snuggled up in the bed together. And the 2-year-old was reading to he was 3 and she was like 5 or 6. He was reading to her and she was narrating back to him what he read because he had no clue what he had read. He could read it, but he had no clue what it meant. And so, one of the things we've talked about a lot is how in families, we all have strengths and weaknesses, and we bring those strengths and weaknesses to the table and we help each other. Like, that's why we have families, because it's no fun living life by ourselves. It's more enjoyable when we can do it together with others and partner together and help each other. And when we bring our strengths to the table, we're helping someone else overcome some of their weaknesses. And they're bringing their strengths and helping us overcome some of our weaknesses. So those things are all really important when we're talking about behavior and rules and bridging that communication gap. And this ties in actually to the last point that I had. The escalation cycle. We go in a cycle when we are escalating things, and that top peak is where that meltdown happens. So when things start to really accelerate, that's the point of no return. Like, you're going through this cycle. You will have to go all the way through to de-escalation. There is no turning back at this point. You had your chance early on. It's passed. Buckle up. We're in for a ride. And you cannot really help kids process through that until after they have reached recovery. Because even after the meltdown, they're so exhausted and emotionally spent that they just are not capable. And I don't have many meltdowns these days anymore, but I do have a few still. And there is one that has come to be known as Hurricane Amy in our house. And I was so frustrated, so overwhelmed. I was searching for heavy work and I ended up upending furniture that day. Like, I was just so overdone. I had missed all the early cues. It was not pleasant. But my kids had watched me support them through meltdowns so many times that when that happened, my daughter sent me a text and said, I know you're upset and I want to help you, but I can't help you while you're loud. So I can come help you when you're quieter, which was a great way of expressing, I want to help you. I understand your feelings, but I have limitations too. And then once I finally processed through that meltdown, because once it starts, there's no stopping it. Everybody came back into the room and they're like, hey, let us help you clean this up. And then let's sit down, make a cup of tea. Let's talk about why you're frustrated. And then let's see what we can do to support you, because that's what families are for. Families are to support each other through the challenging things in life, to have your back. And we start creating those kinds of relationships, that kind of family culture, through some of the other things we talked about earlier today, such as spending time doing drip every day, building those positive moments. And when we respect our kids and treat them with the same kind of respect we would want to be treated, then later on, when we need help, then they end up treating us the way that we treated them.
Exactly.
And I know people have heard that before. Like, I used to say when my daughter was little, I'd say, no, ma'am. And so when she'd be upset about something, she would say, no, ma'am, which sounded way better than no.
Amy, we only have a few minutes left, but one thing that's common in the autistic world is nonverbal.
Yes, that's true.
And so using your eyes becomes critical.
Yes.
And I still believe that you can use drip and the techniques that you've talked about in those situations. In fact, they may even be more important.
Yes, they are. They are very important, because otherwise you're not getting that positive connection. And it's that positive connection that is what encourages kids to do the hard work of trying to make those neural connections to be able to connect. So those first two are really critical before you have language. Rules, I did make rules before my kids had language, and I would talk about it, but it was really more for me so that I set my expectations at a level that was reasonable.
Yeah.
And I was also teaching them through the consequences. Every time my daughter crawled into the fireplace, she went into the pack and play. So eventually she made the connection. Hey, you crawl into the fireplace, you go to the pack and play. I don't want that. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, and I don't know why, but the example that you gave about folding the clothes and having the folded clothes basket really resonates with me, because at the end of the day, like, if that gets your kid to a good place, who cares if they don't follow the accepted way of doing things?
Exactly. Exactly. You are the king or the queen of your castle, and you get to call the rules. So if you don't want to do, like, we want to leave off folding laundry, we leave off folding laundry. We use paper plates every night in our house because, quite honestly, I need the extra time.
Yeah.
So, find what works for you and do it. Nobody else is living your life, and you don't have to prepare your kids for life by, oh, well, they've got to fold clothes because they have to fold clothes when they grow up. No, they don't.
Yeah.
And also dealing with meltdowns is also something that you can do when they're nonverbal or non-speaking. All of these things are things you can do when they're non-speaking. It's less conversation and more communicating with your eyes and your behavior. That's where that becomes really critical. But how you treat your child when they're having a meltdown has a huge impact on how they feel.
Yeah.
And how they respond and how much they want to connect with you. So, all these things are relevant. The first two are really important, though, with non-speaking children, but the last two are also relevant. Just it's less conversation.
Amy, this was, unfortunately, we got to stop and we could just keep going. This was a great discussion, and I think we're going to have you back again, because
I'd love that.
we know there's other techniques and parts that you alluded to that I think we'd all like to learn about. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're most welcome.
For a really interesting discussion. Have a wonderful day. And thank you to our viewers for listening. We're going to post this on our YouTube page, and you'll see pieces of this also on our Facebook page. And there'll be more to come with Amy. So everyone stay tuned, and thank you very much. Bye.
All right. Thank you so much.
You bet. Take care. Bye, everyone. Bye. As always, consult your physician before trying any of our products. For more information, visit NeuroNeeds.com. We would appreciate it if you would like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for being part of our journey.